Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
It's such a powerful idea, isn't it?
Today we're taking a look at the law of the mirror, a fascinating concept about how the world reflects our inner selves back to us.
This idea that what we see in others, especially those things that really get under our skin, can actually tell us something about ourselves.
We're using your video transcript to guide this deep dive, so let's jump right in.
Totally. It's like, have you ever noticed how sometimes you meet someone and you immediately clash?
Exactly.
Or you get so annoyed by a specific habit someone has?
The transcript lays it out really well, using this metaphor of a mirror to show how our reactions to the outside world, whether it's the people we clash with or the situations that frustrate us, can actually reveal these hidden truths about ourselves. This law of the mirror suggests that those reactions might be giving us clues about our own hidden beliefs or patterns.
Not just our beliefs, but also our patterns, maybe even those parts of ourselves that we don't like to admit are there.
Yeah, kind of like those times when you catch your reflection doing something embarrassing.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, is that really me?
Precisely.
Except in this case, it's our reactions to other people that are holding up the mirror.
And this isn't about labeling ourselves as good or bad.
Right, it's about self-awareness.
It's about recognizing patterns so we can grow.
So let's break down how this law of the mirror actually works. The source material you provided talks about 4 specific situations, 4 different ways this law can show up in our lives. I'm actually really curious about this first one, the mirror of similarity. It's basically saying that what bugs us in others might be something we secretly dislike in ourselves, right?
That's the one. And this is where things start to get really interesting. We all have those little things that drive us crazy in other people. But what if, and just hear me out here, what if those annoyances were actually reflections of something we're grappling with within ourselves?
Okay, I can see where you're going with this. So give me an example. How would this mirror of similarity play out in a real-life scenario?
Okay, let's say you have a friend who is chronically late. Like, they show up late for everything, no matter how much you try to gently nudge them towards punctuality.
Ooh, I think we all know someone like that. And it can be super frustrating, right?
Exactly. But now, the mirror of similarity asks you to pause and reflect. Instead of simply labeling your friend as inconsiderate or disrespectful, could it be possible that you also struggle with time management in other areas of your life?
You know, now that you mention it, I do have a tendency to overbook myself and then feel rushed trying to get everything done on time.
Perhaps you procrastinate on deadlines at work or have a habit of running late for appointments?
I always attributed it to being ambitious, but maybe there's a bit of a time management issue there that I haven't fully addressed.
And that's exactly the point. This reflection isn't about making you feel bad about yourself. It's about holding up a mirror and saying, hey, look at this aspect of yourself that maybe needs a little attention. It's about recognizing that sometimes the qualities we judge harshly in others are often the very qualities we struggle with ourselves, even if we don't want to admit it.
That makes so much sense. It's like by understanding those shadow sides within ourselves, those parts we often try to hide or deny, we can approach others with a little more compassion and understanding. Instead of getting annoyed by that friend who's always late, maybe we can approach the situation with a little more empathy, knowing that we might have our own time-bending tendencies lurking beneath the surface.
Absolutely. And the more we can accept those parts of ourselves, the more forgiving and understanding we can become of others.
Okay, that's really making me think. So this mirror of similarity is all about those hidden reflections of ourselves in the behaviors of others. What about the opposite? What happens when we encounter people who are our polar opposites? The source material you sent actually had a name for that one too, right?
It did. It's called the mirror of opposites. And it's all about those times when we have really intense reactions to people who seem completely different from us. Like those personality clashes that make you wonder how 2 people can see the world so differently.
Oh, tell me about it. I know someone who's so incredibly organized, their sock drawer is color-coded. And honestly, it kind of drives me crazy. I'm more of a creative chaos type.
Yeah.
You know? And it's not just about tidiness sometimes. It's about values or life choices.
Right. And those strong reactions often stem from an imbalance within ourselves. Think of it like a pendulum swing. If we're constantly swinging to one extreme in our own lives, we might overcompensate by judging the opposite extreme in others.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. So in the case of my color-coded sock drawer friend, maybe it's not really about their organizational skills at all. Maybe it's that their super organized way of life is highlighting some area where I'm feeling out of control or overwhelmed.
That's exactly it. Or let's say you're someone who's incredibly cautious and risk averse, and you find yourself constantly judging your friend who's always jumping into new things without overthinking it.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's always planning these spontaneous trips. And while I admire their adventurous spirit, a part of me is like, don't you even make a packing list?
Exactly. And that reaction might be a sign that you're craving a bit more spontaneity and adventure in your own life. It's not that your cautious nature is wrong. It's just that this mirror of opposites is highlighting an area where a little more balance might serve you well.
This is so fascinating. It's like instead of seeing these personality clashes as just annoyances,
Yeah.
we can actually use them as opportunities to understand ourselves better.
Precisely. It's about asking ourselves, what is it about this person's opposite quality that's triggering such a strong reaction in me? And what does that tell me about my own need for balance in that area of my life?
Okay, so we've talked about the mirror of similarity, those hidden reflections of ourselves and other people's behaviors. And we've unpacked the mirror of opposites, those extreme reactions that highlight areas where we might need a bit more balance. What's next on this law of the mirror journey?
Well, next up is the mirror of projection. And this one can be a little trickier to spot. It can be. It's about those times when we judge others for things we might be doing ourselves, but maybe not in such an obvious way.
Okay, I think I'm going to need an example for this one. It sounds a little like the mirror of similarity, but with an extra layer of complexity.
You're right, it is similar to the mirror of similarity, but with this one, it's not so much about recognizing the same flaw in ourselves. It's more about uncovering a hidden hypocrisy, a blind spot where we're judging someone for something we're doing in a different context, maybe even unconsciously.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Give me a real-life scenario so I can wrap my head around this.
All right, imagine you have a coworker who's constantly seeking validation from your boss. They're always highlighting their accomplishments, even exaggerating their role in team projects. And it really rubs you the wrong way. You might label them as attention-seeking or insecure.
Ooh, yeah, I've definitely worked with someone like that. It can be pretty frustrating to feel like someone is constantly trying to one-up everyone else.
Exactly. But now here's where the mirror of projection comes in. It asks us to consider, are we perhaps seeking validation in other areas of our lives, maybe in ways that are less obvious?
Wow, I see what you mean.
Are we overly concerned with likes on social media? Do we fish for compliments from our partners or friends?
It's not that seeking validation is inherently bad, but maybe it's about noticing when it becomes excessive or starts to negatively impact our relationships.
Precisely. The mirror of projection is about shining a light on those blind spots, those areas where we might be engaging in the very behavior we're criticizing in others, but in a different form or context.
It's like that saying, when you point a finger at someone, there are three fingers pointing back at you.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all capable of these behaviors to some degree, and judging others doesn't make us immune to them.
This law of the mirror is really making me look at things in a whole new light. So we've covered the mirror of similarity, the mirror of opposites, and the mirror of projection. What's the final reflection we need to understand?
The final one is the mirror of idealization, and it's all about those unrealistic expectations we place on others and the inevitable disappointment that follows. We all do this, you know? We create these idealized images of how we want people to be, how we want relationships to unfold. And when reality doesn't match up to those fantasies, we end up frustrated and hurt.
Oh, 100%. We've all had that friend who just can't seem to show up on time no matter how many times we've talked about it. Or that partner who leaves their clothes on the floor even though we have asked them repeatedly to pick them up. It's like, why can't you just be the person I want you to be?
And that's the trap of idealization. We invest so much energy in trying to change people to fit our preconceived notions of who they should be, that we miss out on appreciating them for who they truly are.
So it's about recognizing that our happiness can be contingent on other people changing to meet our expectations.
Exactly. The more we cling to those idealized images, the more we set ourselves up for disappointment. The key is to relinquish that need for control, to accept people for who they are, flaws and all. That doesn't mean we have to accept bad behavior, but it does mean letting go of the illusion that we can mold people into our ideal versions of them.
This whole law of the mirror conversation has been so insightful. But I have to admit, it's also a little daunting. It's like looking into a mirror and noticing all these imperfections we never saw before. So how do we take all this information, these reflections, and actually use it for positive change?
That's a great question. And you're right, it can be a bit overwhelming at first. But the good news is, simply becoming aware of these reflections is a huge step in the right direction. The next step is to shift our perspective. Instead of seeing these mirrors as sources of criticism, what if we started seeing them as opportunities for growth?
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So it's not about beating ourselves up for our flaws or trying to force people to change. It's about using these reflections as guideposts, right? To understand ourselves better, to set healthier boundaries, to cultivate more realistic expectations.
Exactly. The video transcript you provided actually touches on a powerful concept that's really relevant here, the idea of teachers in our lives.
Oh, right. It's that idea that the people who trigger us, who push our buttons, who hold up that mirror, even when we'd rather look away, those are our greatest teachers.
Precisely. Now, I know the word teachers might seem a little odd in this context. It's not about condoning bad behavior or excusing people who mistreat us. It's about recognizing that everyone we encounter, especially those who challenge us, is offering us a valuable opportunity for growth.
So if someone's constant lateness is driving us crazy instead of getting angry or resentful, we can use that as an opportunity to examine our own relationship with time, our need for control, our ability to communicate our needs effectively.
Exactly. Or if we find ourselves judging someone for being overly cautious, maybe that's a sign that we need to inject a little more spontaneity and adventure into our own lives.
So how do we actually put this into practice?
Right.
What are some tangible things we can do to work with these reflections and these teachers in our lives?
Well, first and foremost, approach this process with self-compassion. It's easy to fall into self-criticism when we see those less than flattering aspects of ourselves reflected back at us. But remember, we're all a work in progress. No one has this figured out perfectly. So instead of judging yourself, try to approach it with curiosity. When you notice a strong reaction, ask yourself, what is this reaction teaching me about myself? What need of mine is not being met in this situation? What boundary might I need to set?
So it's about turning those aha moments into action steps.
Exactly. And sometimes those action steps might involve having an honest conversation with the person who's triggering you, not in a blaming or accusatory way, but from a place of self-awareness and a desire to improve the relationship.
This has been such an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. So to recap for our listeners, the law of the mirror suggests that the world is constantly reflecting our inner selves back to us. By paying attention to our reactions to others, those things that annoy us, trigger us, or make us uncomfortable, we can gain valuable insights into our own beliefs, patterns, and areas for growth.
Beautifully put. And remember, this isn't about blaming ourselves or others. It's about taking ownership of our experiences, cultivating self-awareness, and using those reflections to become the best versions of ourselves.
I love that. It's about turning those aha moments into opportunities for growth and connection. Well, that was absolutely fascinating. A huge thank you to our listener for sending in this incredibly thought-provoking video transcript. And thank you, as always, for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time for another exploration into the heart of what matters.